Good day, friends. Wayne Thomas here from Avenue Vineyard again. Hoping you guys are having a good week. Just trying to connect, touch base again with a little bit of a midweek reflection. And, I did have something else planned for today. There was something else in store. But some tragic news from the end of last week, has been sitting with me. I've been having a hard time processing. Many of you would have heard or would be aware now that on May 27th, this tragic and heartbreaking news that the remains of 215 children had been found on the grounds of Kamloops Indian Residential School. And I have many Indigenous friends, and so the weight of this news was difficult to process, and I know it's been difficult for many to process. I'm still in the midst of processing it and trying to find a healthy way forward for myself. But I did think that today maybe something I could share with you guys is part of what the process has looked like for me so far. Last year has been a weird year. I don't think many of us were expecting it to look the way that it did. And the last thing we needed to hear was something else tragic in the news. And, reflecting back on last year, there was one experience for me that was really quite significant and formative, but it was after the events with George Floyd. And that was heavy, and that was in the news, and there was a lot of protest, and racism has really reared its head so many times this year. And I one day we were chatting. I was chatting with some of the youth, and a couple of young guys, are Black guys, and they started sharing some of their experiences here in good old Edmonton, Alberta, but some of their experiences where they had experienced racism, where people had been suspicious of them or not treated them appropriately, and to them it was obvious racism, and it really struck me. And I know that racism exists. It's terrible. We need to get rid of it. I want to get rid of it. But hearing these guys share their experience, it struck me in a new way, because the feelings that they shared, the experiences that they shared, they were all foreign to me. I have never experienced any of those things. And I don't know that I had really heard the stories of people that I care about, people that I'm close to. I hadn't heard them share those experiences. And it was hard for me to hear that. I felt bad for my friends that they had experienced that they had encountered those types of things. And I felt that it started to birth in me, I guess, a bit of a new awareness. And so over the course of the year, as racism has been exposed, I've tried to pay better attention. And then the story that breaks at the end of last week, and the tragic nature of it, this heartbreaking 215 children. Children. And learning more about the truth of these residential schools, and I feel silly with this. I on one hand, I do. Like I never learned about them in school. I had no idea about them. I think the first time I heard residential school mentioned was a number of years ago. One of the seniors that we work with at the youth center, he mentioned that with some of the issues coming out about the residential schools, he had attended a residential school. He had experienced abuse in the residential school, and for him it had been many years previously. And so in my head, I just kind of assumed that, this was something tragic from decades ago, many years ago, far removed. But I didn't know the depth of it, and I really didn't understand the issues. After hearing the news on the weekend, I did a little bit of online research, and I was shocked to learn that the last residential school shut down in Canada in 1996. I was shortly graduated from high school at that point. I had no idea the history and the stories that went along with residential schools, and this is hard. You know, one of the sad truths is that this news is being reported as a discovery. And for many of us, it kind of feels like a discovery. We didn't know this before, but the sad truth is that this is something that has been known by Indigenous families for a very long time, that has just now been exposed through the media. This is not news to them. This is not a discovery. They have been wondering for years, you know, some of the atrocities that took place in these schools. And the sad part, the really hard part for me to wrestle with, is that many of these schools were administered by churches. And it is so wrong. You know, through some of the online discussion, it came up, you know, like a girl that I graduated high school with, an Indigenous girl, like she is very proud of her culture, and rightly so. And she was having a hard time processing this recent set of events and how it hit the media and people discussing it and asking her a lot of questions. And she reflected her sadness that this, again, is not news. This has been something in the Indigenous community for many, many years. And it was something that even when we were back in school, she tried to talk about, and people wouldn't listen. People didn't listen. I didn't listen. I know that I didn't listen. I didn't hear it. And I realized that, you know, for her and for my Indigenous friends and my other friends of color, I haven't seen and I haven't heard a lot of their experience. I haven't tried to put myself in their shoes and understand how that feels for them. And for that, I want to say that I am sorry. I am sorry that I haven't seen you. I haven't seen those issues for you. I'm sorry that I haven't heard you. I really hope, you know, I know that I have experienced in my life times where I have felt heard and where I have felt understood, where I have felt accepted despite my faults, despite my flaws. You know, for me, that's one of the glorious things about Jesus, is that he saw me just as I am, and he accepted me, and he loved me, and he did what he did for me to set me free, to give me life, to give me hope. And, you know, one of the great things that Jesus said when he was starting to do what he did, he said, you know, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has set me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. And that is something that for me as a person of faith, like I believe that, and I want to embrace that. Not just for me, but that is something that I am supposed to help my neighbors find. That's something I'm supposed to help all my friends find. And you know, when you can feel loved and accepted, and when you feel seen, there is something just so freeing about that, to be known, to feel understood, to feel valued. And so to my friends of color, to my Indigenous friends, I want to say to you guys that I want to commit from this day forward to see you better, to listen to your stories, to try and hear you. I want you to feel heard. I want you to feel known. I want you to feel accepted. I want you to feel valued. I want to do my part. And I want to encourage all of us to do our part. You know, we have this right to freedom, but freedom is also our responsibility to stand up and speak for the oppressed. But I think that maybe first we need to learn that part of that responsibility is just to sit in the uncomfortable space of some of these issues, because they are not comfortable. I think that's part of the reason why we have a hard time acknowledging the truth. It's not comfortable, but we need to commit to sit in that space and do the work to learn, to question, to reflect, to listen, to be a good friend, so that we can keep going on the path of reconciliation. We need to hear the truth, because without the truth, there can be no reconciliation, and that is what we need for true healing. So for all my hurting friends out there, to the Indigenous community, I am sorry that I didn't listen. And going forward, my commitment is to try and learn how to do that in a better way, in a way that honors your beauty, that honors your humanity. So folks, that's been a bit of my process. I encourage you to wrestle with some of these thoughts yourself and consider, how can we better listen? How can we better love? So I'm going to leave you with that. Hope the rest of your week is good. I pray peace and encouragement over you. And yeah, amen.